Good evening. We're back. Um, this is Spiritual Therapy Live, Monday night. Um, let's see here. We're going to hope that the technological difficulties that we had last week, that we're going to be void of those things this week. So we're going to continue what we were talking about last week, and that was about spiritual death. And so, being that we don't have those issues that we had initially, um, I can give you a brief recap. My name is Ebony Blackman Humphrey, and I present to you Spiritual Therapy Live. My self proclaimed title is the Soul Specialist. So, what is a soul specialist? So, my area of interest or my area of expertise is understanding the spiritual implications of, behavioral patterns of everyday people. So, I've done a lot of research relating to personalities, psychological conditions. And so, one of the things that I find to be extremely interesting is how the eastern part of the world really does take into consideration the spiritual aspects of life. So you have different indigenous people who, believe in the metaphysical, and they have rituals and ceremonies to welcome various spirits into their atmosphere, because it's believed that with the coming of that spirit or that deity, that something is going to change in their natural world. So, as the soul specialist, my area of interest is those spiritual elements of life that kind of get overlooked. So, my philosophy with regards to the spiritual elements of life is that the spirit is more powerful than the natural world, meaning that we are a conduit, so to speak, of what happens supernaturally. So I believe that, there's components within our being that um, gives us an eternal sense of existence. And then there is a portion of our being that is time limited. What we're going to be talking about, or what we have been talking about, is spiritual death. And so, if you were not privy to logging on last week, I'm going to give you a recap. So, the recap that we were talking about is in reference to how there's three main components to our being. There is a natural aspect of our being, that which is tangible, that which can be touched, that which can be corrupted, in a sense that it can lose its shine, its luster, and that's what we physically see with regards to humans. That you'll have a baby, so to speak, whose skin is tight, the turgor is there, and then as that baby goes through the various processes or life stages in life, all the way to an older man, that the caricature of that outer shell begins to change and it begins to warp. So the image that we gave last week was of a wilting tree. And so this tree was symbolic to us as humans, because we talked about how the tree, or the seed that the tree sprung from, was, or seemed to be, inanimate, meaning that it did not appear to have life. But then when you introduced it to a environment that what seemed to not be alive then became alive. And so we were using that analogy to better understand the composite of our being as humans. That you know, we're just like that seed. That when we're put in an environment, that environment causes us to spring forth, and branching comes from us, and all that we become or all that we are begins to come out of that shell, out of that outer casing, and it allows for people to see who we are. Right? We get to stand as trees, and you know, there's various components or various uses to trees, and so we were using that analogy last week. So we're going to continue in that same thought. I'm not real sure if anyone likes to see my face, but I am a professor, so by nature, teaching kind of comes natural to me. So I don't want to, waste time having you gawk at my face. So I'm going to, at this juncture, I'm going to switch my screen so that you can see what we're going to talk about this week, because it's real relevant. And then I'm going to touch on a slide that I didn't get the opportunity to touch on last week because of the time crunch. So let me finagle here and get my screen up. So last week it was giving me a hard time because there was a button I did not click. So you should be seeing my screen at this point. And so you will see this slide here is a little bit off, but we'll roll with it. I'm guessing that it's something with the font, but this is the slide that I want to touch bases on. I just want to check and make sure that my slide is visible. So as I said earlier, there are the eastern part of the world really does dive into this connotation that we are spirit beings, and being spirit beings really does lend itself to why there is variations among us, because there's the spirit, I don't want to say world and sound out of space, but the element of the invisible, right? Because the spirit means there are domains, and so we are in a naturalistic domain. And so what does that mean in reference to life? Our when we walk on the ground holds us because we're made of its same composition. So there's nothing in this domain, this naturalistic domain, that we cannot identify with. So that's why we are extremely crafty as humans at putting or co-creating, so to speak. So we can take we can reroute rivers, we can reroute streams, lakes, we can build boats that can sail upon water, we can build submarines that can be submerged in water. So that's what we can build submarine. Okay, I'm sorry you guys are hearing me, because I'm trying to check and see if you guys can see my screen, and so I see that you can't see my screen, which is very unfortunate. So let me try this again. So I'm not sure that the issue here with this software with Google, but I'm guessing, um, to get the best service, you gotta upgrade, I'm guessing. So I'm trying to verify that you guys can see my screen because it's kind of paramount that you can see my screen. So I'm gonna check again and just make sure that you can see my screen. I'm not sure why my phone won't cooperate, but so as I was saying with regards to this the spiritual connotation in life. So there's an invisible realm that we cannot physically see, yet we can see. And so we walk in an existence that I want to say overrides what's naturalistic to us as human creatures, meaning, though we can build boats that sail on water, submarines that can be submerged, though we can, have breeding programs in a laboratory, and we can cause certain animals to escape extinction. We're very crafty because we're natural to this domain. Well, there is another domain that we're not naturalistic to. Um, if we lend ourselves more to the earthly domain, and so I'll break that down. And so what the analogy that I want to give, it's kind of like going into the ocean, right? One may think, they have a knack for water, and so they're always in the water, okay? But being in water, submerged in water, is not naturalistic to us. It's naturalistic to fish, it's naturalistic to other marine life, but it's not naturalistic to us. However, there are some species that can live in both domains. One fish that comes to mind is the mud flapper, I believe it's called. This particular fish has gills, and these gills causes this fish. It can waddle its way out of the water, and it can come up on land, and it can spend time up on land for a certain period of time, and then this particular fish has to go back to its domain. And so this is how we are as humans, in my opinion, that though we are walking the earth, though we were created to dominate or have dominion in this domain, there's a duality component to us that enables us to cross over into a domain that's not naturalistic to us, meaning there is an invisible realm, a spiritual realm that we have the ability to get into as humans. And the process that we take, or the pathway that we take, varies depending on what type of person that you are. So that's what I want, to elaborate on in this discussion, because I mentioned a slide last week, and I'm hoping that my screen shows. But if it doesn't show, I'm just gonna keep moving. So I showed a slide last week that was a triangle, and so the element of the triangle was there was no definite point, meaning each direction moved toward an infinite position, meaning there's no end. Okay, and so last week I spoke about the God of man, the spirit of man, and then the soul of man. And so when I was speaking in reference to the God of man, saying that there is a divine nature given to us as creatures that we don't necessarily understand, can't conceptualize, meaning we don't understand the the dynamics of the divine that has intertwined itself into our humanity, right? Meaning, if you take the role of a mother or you take the role of a father, that mother or that father has authority over another being, right? Meaning you get to exercise your will over another creature, right? And so at any point in that experience, you could tilt toward being evil or you could tilt toward being good, right? And so there's a divine nature to say that no one, no human crowned our humanity and texturized it to say that this is a mother, this is a father. These are roles given to us as human creatures that are divine. We cannot explain it, right? But we and to say also that though we can explain it, our operation within the context of the role is so divine that a mother cannot explain to you how she is a mother or how she knows to function as a mother. She just knows she just can, right? And so, and that same thing goes for men. There's no, no crowning, so to speak, uh, that was given to a male species that would say you are a father, right? Similar to kings or queens. These things just come to be. Um, we can use nature. Um, there are queens in ant colonies. There's queens inside of bee colonies, and they can't tell you how they know that this person is high above them. They just know this person is high above them and that they submit to the authority of this person, but they can't explain to you why. So there is a divine nature when it comes to our being, okay? And then there's a spirit element to our being, meaning love, fear, anger. All of these things are, they're not residuals, but they are components that make up who we are on a personal level, right? So you could have a person that has an humble spirit. You could have a person that's, constantly, uplifting and encouraging. Um, these are things, these are components to that person's being that they can't explain to you why she's just always happy, or why she's mad, or why she's bitter, or why she's resent. These things are spiritual elements that inhabit who we are as creatures. And the correct word I want to use, they extract from us space, because it's true, because spirits are like wind. You can't see them, but you can see their effect, and if you can see their effect, then you could see them. So So the spirit element of a person, so they extract from us our being, meaning they get to um, they get to occupy space within the context of your person, and from your person they get to uh, did I lose connection? Did I lose connection? Okay, I didn't lose connection, but my camera is going out for some reason. Okay, well that must mean it's showing my screen, okay? Because it doesn't show the light here, so I'm guessing it. I thought I lost connection, but I didn't. It's showing my screen. Okay, it's making me happy. So, um, so so the spirit part of our experience, that spirit gets to occupy space within um, our being. And when people look at us, they get to see what is occupying us, right? So intelligence is substance, right? Because you can have a child that um, is wise and understands, and as a result of that wisdom and understanding, that child is a genius. That child has quick understanding. But then you could take another human being that comes from the same family, and that child is not intellectually gifted as the child next to it, right? And so, how can that be? That can be because what's occupying space in the first child is not occupying that same space in the second child, right? And so, in biblical scriptures, that that particular example has a lot of substance there, because there was a man that was named Jesse, and Jesse had, I believe, 8 children, and what was occupying the 8th child was not occupying the other 7. So that lets you know that the spirit that is within um, serves a purpose as it's occupying space. Okay, and then the third component here, as you can see here, the third component is the spirit. It's the spirit. I mean, I'm sorry, the soul of a man. And so the soul of a man is where my area expertise lies. And because the soul of a man is what makes up the emotional, the conscious experience of being human, to say, okay, I laughed, and I laughed because that was funny. And the reason why it was funny was because it made me think of a time when I saw someone fall off a chair, and that made me laugh. So the intellectual component, when I say intellectual, I mean, the emotional, the conscious awareness, as Freud would say it, the id and the ego. So, those elements make our experience in life, or within our natural domain, it makes our experience vibrant, because as a result of a spiritual encounter, you get a physical response. Okay, so if someone does something to you out of a mean spirit, the physical response is that you cry or you get angry or something. So those things make up the soul of a person. And so that's where I focus a lot of my research on, is understanding the component of our being that makes up the soul. So let's advance to the next slide. And so this slide here deals, I hope you can see it, I'm gonna try to enlarge it if I can. I'm not sure if I can enlarge it, but I'm gonna definitely try so that it can, so that you can see it full screen. Okay, I think I can enlarge it. I'm going to enlarge it some more just so that it's more visual. Um, let's see here. Okay, it's a little larger. Okay, that's good. Let's see here. Okay, I'm hoping that this works when I'm attempting here. Okay, so here we're talking about spiritual death as we were talking about the week previous. And so I'm gonna just shrink it just a little bit. And so obviously me adjusting its dimensions is not liking that. So it's not physically showing, let's see, maybe I can manipulate it in such a way because this is a teaching, right? So let me see here if I can manipulate the image so that you can fully see. Let's see. I don't want to do that. I want to do that there. I'm hoping that makes it better for you to see and for me to explain. Okay. All right. So as you see here, it says, so I'm going to click done here. It says spiritual death. And so, because that's what we're talking about. And the reason why we're talking about that is because, you know, in our present society, we have, you know, depression running rampant. We have bipolarism running rampant. We have a lot of psychological conditions that are running rampant. And what we're finding out is that the medication is not working because not just because of non-compliance. Non-compliance is a big issue when it comes to, you know, behavioral issues or mental instability, right? You know, we say, okay, well, take this medication. But as a result of taking this medication to soothe a mind issue, what happens is a lot of patients, so we see, have side effects. And the side effects are so great that the individual just decides not to take the medication. And so my query is there something that we're missing, right? Because other conditions we can eradicate, you know, smallpox, you know, we can aggressively we can aggressively attack that in a laboratory setting. But when it comes to psychological conditions, we find that we are having a hard time honing in on what these conditions are and what they are not. And so as a result of this, we have more people sick than ever, and that number is continuously growing. Okay, so um, so that's why I feel it's so important that I bring to you this concept of spiritual death, because it's the reason why we're having the issues that we're having is because that element of our being, that spiritual part of our being, is so um, clogged, so to speak, that there's not a smooth transition from one domain to the other one. Because remember, as I said, you know, the spiritual domain is more powerful than our natural world. So, it takes I don't want to say a special person, because that's not what it takes. It takes a dying away of the outer self, and it takes a journey through the inner self to get to the innermost self. And so the innermost self is that part of your being that is like the fish that can get out of the water. and the fish that can get out of the water and walk around in another domain that's not naturalistic to it, and it can't stay on land for a long period of time, because it has to get back into the water, because the water is where it lives, the water where it was where it was created to be. And so that fish can hop out just as we can, right? But I'm reminded of Paul, Apostle Paul. He said that though our outer man perishes away, our inner man has been made new. So he's referencing the inner man. So the inner man is our soul component, and the innermost man is our spiritual component. And so he says the outer man dies away. So what does that mean? That means the more your outer experience, we run inwardly. And so the further you run inwardly, you will meet the spirit, right? And so being that you run inwardly and you meet the spirit, and that's when you meet God. That's when it becomes divine. That's when the experience and the exchange becomes supernatural, because the more you run in, right? Because in the context of biblical scriptures, it says that the righteous run in to him and then they are saved. Well, how can you run into a God that's invisible? That's impossible. You can't run into a God that's invisible, right? Meaning, in this context of biblical scripture, it says that God is omniscient. God is omnipotent. So if God is omniscient and God is omnipotent, then that means he's everywhere all the time. So it doesn't seem practical that you can run into a God that's everywhere all the time. So the only way to do that is to run inside, but you're not running inside in terms of self-gratification or narcissism, because that's perversion, that's backwardness. You're running in to find that which is divine. And so one of the elements of biblical scripture that I totally love and in awe with in growing up was, I was given this book as a kid, and this book had a man that was nude and it had a woman that was nude, and she took a apple off of a tree and then she just handed it to him, and then he took it. And so that was the story of Adam and Eve and how they fell from grace. And so that kind of stuck in my head. A woman taking an apple off of a tree, and he's eating, she took of it, and then she gave it to him and he took of it. And so that element was, well, then how is that bad? And so I had to obviously grow up in order to God give me wisdom to determine, oh yeah, that was totally bad, because that was the moment they relied on the outside. And so meaning they didn't run in, meaning everything that you are meant to be, you have already been created to be. And so because the real you is on the inside. It's the inside. Inside is who the real you is. So it's just no different. When you cry from the inside out. When you get angry from the inside out. When you laugh, you're laughing from the inside out. So the real you is on the inside. And so, so the book, the children book that was given to me was fascinating, because not because the apple was wrong. Even if it was apple, it could have been something else, but not that the apple was wrong, but because of where they looked. They looked for wisdom on the outside. They looked to be a God on the outside. But we as human creatures have already been given a divine nature. And that divine nature is you can't explain it. And so when she did that, that set creation on a scavenger hunt to look outwardly for something that was always inwardly. You don't have to look for wisdom on the outside, because wisdom has been given unto thee on the inside. You don't have to look for love on the outside, because love has already been given unto thee on the inside. Love is a spirit. To be healthy in your mind is a spirit. The mind is a spirit. So when you go and you look on the outside, you are set on a path that is never ending, because the real you is on the inside. And the more you look on the outside for who you are, the you're gonna miss who you are, right? And so in our couple minutes that we have left, I did some research. So I'm gonna switch out my screen, and then you're gonna see my face. So let me hit stop screen. Okay, so you should see my face. So I did some research, and I'll post these articles a little bit later. But it talks about explaining consciousness. And it says here, consciousness is one of the last frontiers of science where we do not even know how to think about the problem. And it says, some will resist its mystification for fear of losing the childhood innocence of love and honor, because these things are not tangible. You can't build love. You can't build honor. These things are spiritual elements. So it says the conscious mind cannot be the brain, because nothing in the brain could be the medium in which a purple cow is rendered, be the thinking thing as I think before I am. The brain isn't what appreciates wine, hates racism, and loves somebody, or act with more responsibility. And so this article suggests that there's a dualism, right? And so this dualism, there's no explanation for how the mind directs the physical brain. Conversation of energy is violated, and that is because the brain and the mind are two separate things. The brain is physical. The mind is spiritual. Okay? That's what I want you guys to take away from this. And so I jotted some notes down in reference to what we're going to elaborate on. So my paper here. So it talks about, the mind being a vehicle of consciousness. And we're talking about how perception is that vehicle of the mind, and how perception is invisible. And we're going to be elaborating on higher degrees of intelligence, because today the world is moving towards artificial intelligence. They are right now crafting robots using synthetic psychology. And so these robots are going to have a humanistic experience without actually being human. So that goes to show you that there are components to our humanity that can be made in a laboratory, right? That you can insinuate to a robot what he or she should feel based on a certain scenario, right? Because in psychiatry, you know, if a person is void of emotions and feelings, we call that person a sociopath, a psychopath. We call that person, if a person is so self-absorbed, and we call that person a narcissist. So right now, robots are being crafted in laboratories that will engage in the same humanistic experience as us as humans, which lets you know there are vast um, um, knowledge with regards to our humanity and how it can be extracted to a degree and translated to another species that is inanimate. You know, I'm just floored at the fact that maybe they're going to have robots have babies. I don't know. Maybe they would. I don't know. But even if they tried, those robots still lack a divine nature. There's no way those robots can engage in the divine, because you don't have to charge us up to work. We don't run off of lithium. We run off of a spirit, right, that we can't tangibly see. So I know I'm running out of time. I want to thank you guys for chiming in. I want to thank you for viewing this session, even if you catch it at a later date. Do me a favor, you know, subscribe to my page, to my YouTube channel. I mean to say, share our channel with someone else. And it has been a pleasure to serve you. And I will see you next week, the same time, Monday night at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. Have a great night.